Greetings, this is the man who pretends to be Charles Darwin. I'm actually the author Stanley A. Rice, and I'm talking to you about Forgotten Landscapes, which is my most recent book. The subtitle is How Native Americans Created the Pre-Columbian North America and What We Can Learn from It. And that's that last part that I want to talk to you about right now. What can we learn from the things that happened in Native American history on the North American continent? What does it mean for us now? Well, first of all, what they were able to do and what we are still having trouble with is to live sustainably upon the land, as the natives did before Columbus. And some examples are, for instance, the way they got their food, with agriculture as one example, and they knew the benefits of having more than one kind of crop together in their agricultural fields, and even of agroforestry. This is something that they did routinely and that is very rare today. We could learn from their example about how to do that. Also, we could learn about energy efficiency. One example is that their villages had cool shade. They had a lot of trees, and so they kept cool because of the transpiration from the trees. And so we could learn about agriculture, energy efficiency, how to live sustainably in the world by doing something, a modern version of what the Native Americans did throughout history. Now, they didn't know they were doing these things. All they knew about agriculture is that if you grew these crops together, they grew well. And if you planted the crops in the shade of trees, then they also grew well and there were fewer pest problems. And that it was easier to not cut the trees down. Maybe it wasn't because they were some great scientists, but they just didn't want to cut the trees down. That was too much work. Another thing is cultural diversity of language and ethnicity. Now, we think of Native Americans as being all the same. That's not true. There were 500 tribes and almost 500 languages, and they were mutually unintelligible, and that's why the Native Americans were so good at sign language. They had to tolerate cultural and linguistic diversity over the continent because they had continent-wide trade networks, and they didn't live in little separate tribes. They interacted with one another all the time, and they had to learn how to do that. Not always peacefully, but their record of peace was at least as good as the European record of peace. And the third thing that we can learn from the Native Americans is the love of discovery. Sometimes what you'll find is politicians will claim that we don't know and we don't want to know. One example was from Oklahoma, where I lived until recently, in which the legislators voted for a bill in which they wanted to monitor how much groundwater was used for irrigation. And it was a largely Republican legislature that passed the bill. And then the Republican governor, who was extreme even in his own party, vetoed it. And that seemed to be his way of saying, we don't know how much water we're using, and we don't want to know. Well, the Native Americans, if they had that attitude, we don't know and we don't want to know, would never have been able to fill, within the space of about 1,000 years, the entire North and South American continents. And so there are things that we can learn from them, and this is the man who pretends to be Charles Darwin, the author Stanley A. Rice, and I hope you will look at my book and you will think about what you could learn from it. Taliho and amen.